If you're homeschooling, you have a vision for your child's education that is uniquely personal, designed to create a culture of thinking that leads to profound intellectual growth. Welcome to This is Homeschooling. I'm your host, Blair Lee. Personalized, meaningful education that leads to deep intellectual growth. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? But when putting something like this together, it can be absolutely overwhelming. Now, the challenge actually comes about because a lot of people skip an essential step, and that is coming to understand how their child learns. This is a big topic and it takes a little bit of time to explain. So we've divided this into two episodes. This is the first episode, and in this episode, I'll cover what to evaluate in order to figure out how your child learns. In part two of this, I will cover how you evaluate. I wanted to come up with a practical explanation of what's probably a foreign concept to you, and that is the why and how of coming to understand how your child learns, and once you gather the information, what you can do with it. As I was binge watching the Olympics, something I do every 2 years, the inspiration for how to make this concept practical and applicable struck me. Now, I love the Olympics. I love every single bit of it, from the personal stories. This year, I loved watching Snoop Dogg and Flavor Flav. I love watching the dedicated athletes like Simone Biles and Rebecca Andrade in gymnastics. I learned about 3x3 basketball. I love to watch swimming, track, soccer, rugby. I really just love it all. And as I was watching this, I realized that the world of athletics offers a powerful analogy for this discussion. So imagine this. You're a successful coach and a new athlete comes to you. What's the first thing you're going to do? Well, you're probably going to try to figure out what they excel at, what are their challenges, what are their unique talents, so that you can design something that is a personalized program that helps elevate their athletic abilities and their performance. As a successful coach, you would never assume that a one-size-fits-all approach was optimum for that athlete. So it's probably no surprise to you that the cognitive science of learning supports the practices of good coaches. Cognitive science also provides insights into how individuals access and process information. These insights should be at the core of planning a personalized learning experience. To create this for your child, you need to understand how they learn best. This process involves 3 steps. I'll begin by sharing the important characteristics that influence how people learn. Once you know what to look for, the next step is to evaluate where your child is at with those characteristics. In that way, you can develop a comprehensive learning profile for your child. Finally, I'll provide how-to advice for designing a personalized plan for your learner. Just as a coach designs a plan that is tailored to a training regimen for an athlete that maximizes their potential, you'll be able to use the information you gathered to handcraft an educational approach that's deep, meaningful, sustained, and leads to profound intellectual growth as you design this culture of thinking that will be the centerpiece of your homeschooling. Athletes have different training needs based on their age and experience. Younger athletes require different approaches than older, more experienced ones. Tailoring training to the athlete's developmental stage optimizes their development of skills. Coaches are thoughtful of this because learning is influenced by developmental stages of the brain. Young learners process information differently than adolescents. Now, this was really brought home to me the other day as I was working with one of my grandsons on his reading. He's right at the cusp of going from learning to read to reading to learn. And I realized that he's not quite there yet, as he was struggling to put to take some of what he was reading and apply it to a question that was being asked. Now, if you didn't realize that that was a developmental stage that had to do with a child's brain development, you might get frustrated with them because you might think that they just weren't paying attention when it actually is a part of where they're at with the learning process. So in sports, a coach needs to assess an athlete's prior experience. Whether the athlete is a novice or experienced, understanding their background helps the coach decide where to begin training, identify areas for improvement, and build on existing strengths. This foundational understanding is critical for developing a personalized training program that ensures success. This is also important for academics. Learning's most effective when it's connected to what a learner already knows, sort of like little Velcro hooks in their brain. Therefore, assessing prior knowledge is important before making a plan. You want any plan that you make to be as effective as possible, and so you're going to want to identify knowledge gaps. You're going to want to be able to determine a good starting point based on the level of where learners are at. I like to think of this as sort of a page width above where they already are. Of course, review has its place too. In that way, the materials and activities you choose are going to be robust, relevant, and developmentally appropriate. Consider an athlete learning a new sport. If too many complex skills are thrown at the athlete, it leads to overwhelm. So coaches avoid this by breaking down training into manageable drills. They usually give athletes one new skill at a time so that the athletes can learn and perform without overload. So coaches do this for the same reason that you should. Cognitive science emphasizes the limitations of working memory or cognitive load and the amount of space, the mental space where information can be stored and manipulated. It's important that you don't overload this because if you do, it negatively impacts learning, causing kids to shut down or act out or all sorts of different behaviors. It also makes them feel like they're not smart and they're not getting it when it's really because there's just too much information coming at you all at once. If you've ever had somebody, give you like a bunch of different instructions at the same time and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, there's no way I'm getting all this. That's actually a great example of where the amount of information coming to you was just too much for you to handle. And you either needed to slow it down or have it parceled into smaller bits of information. So in sports, an athlete who can absorb information, reflect on their performance, and make adjustments based on their understanding is more likely to improve and succeed at the sport they're working on. This self-awareness and ability to articulate learning through action indicates strong metacognitive skills on the part of the athlete. If you were to start researching the cognitive science of how people learn, you would come across the word metacognition again and again. That's because strong metacognitive skills are essential for accessing and processing information effectively. Metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's learning processes, and it's the ability to retrieve retained information. Athletes can't simply watch others play or listen to a coach's instructions to become skilled. It sounds kind of ridiculous when you think about it in terms of athletics, doesn't it? That's because athletes need to actively participate in practice sessions if they want to improve their skills. Based on our own life experiences, it shouldn't surprise anyone that active involvement is an important component of retaining information. Things like discussion, problem-solving, hands-on projects, these help learners internalize concepts and skills, and plus, it's way more fun to learn when you're actively involved. This is somewhere where homeschoolers really have the benefit of just their learning situation because it's not as big a problem for kids to get up and move around as they're learning as it is in a classroom with 20 to 30 students. Just as athletes are driven by a love of the sport, personal goals, or desire to win, coaches understand the importance of motivation in an athlete's performance. They recognize the connection between motivation to performance and growth. Now, if you've ever watched one of those movie scenes in a locker room where the coach is trying to motivate the players to go out and just give it one more quarter or half or whatever, that is a coach who recognizes that if you can motivate those athletes, they'll go out and they will give a performance above and beyond what they would give if they weren't motivated. A happy can-do attitude is a good thing when it comes to learning, as we know from our own experience. Learners who are emotionally connected and motivated to material are much more likely to retain information, engage deeply, and persist through challenges that really come through all learning situations. Some stuff's easy, some stuff's not as easy, and kids who are motivated to work through the harder parts and who really see that they emotionally feel that they can do it are more likely to persist and succeed. Every athlete has a unique combination of strengths, challenges, and preferences. This is something a coach needs to take into consideration when developing a training program for an individual. Learning outcomes benefit when educators get to know and accommodate individual differences in order to enhance the person's learning experience. For example, some learners learn better using auditory, some visual, some reading, writing, some kinesthetic. For many learners, it's a mix of a couple of these. So if you have a student that's struggling with a subject, and of course you would need to know that they would struggle, and if you understood what learning modalities worked, they really found the easiest to do work in, you could pair the subject that was a challenge to improve learning outcomes for that person, because you would be channeling into one of the primary ways that's easiest for them to access and process information. In part 2 of this series, I cover how to evaluate so that you can begin handcrafting an optimized learning journey for your child. If you have any comments or questions, please write them below this video and I'll come over and answer them personally. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and click the little notification bell. I would greatly appreciate it.